What's up, everybody? Hope everyone's having a good preparation for the new year. I'm going to do an efficient sort of breakdown today of the New Year's Eve hockey slate. It's a nice slate. I think there's some good contests. A bunch of you are in them. Um, I'm going to present my screen here. Let me pull that up and focus on pay dirt projections. And I'll also kind of run through all the different spots and show you what Daily Faceoff thinks as well, since they are a typically a useful uh, comparator. Let me share my screen. Very good. So yeah, we have a 9-game slate. We have some, I think, some good spots, some sneaky spots. It's actually a nice mix of different different spots tonight. So I'm going to do this like I usually do and run it down via the team totals. I'm going to refresh here so that you guys can see up to date pay dirt stats. And I'm going to make sure people in the Discord have a link. They do. Very good. James is ahead of me there. And let's get going then. Let me just make sure I'm sharing my right window here. And it looks like I am. All right, very good. So, looking at this slate, we've got some teams with high totals in Carolina, Edmonton, New Jersey, um, Dallas, Colorado. Then some teams kind of in the middle range between 3 to 4 goals, and then we've got these teams here on the bottom which are 2 to 3 goals. I've already kind of gone through this, so I'm going to give you guys kind of my high-level summary of each spot rather than going through them too much detail, so we can do them in a little bit more of an efficient manner. First, we'll just start with Carolina. Carolina's in a good spot against Columbus. Columbus has not been very good defensively, good high dangerous chances, and shots for matchup. When we look at Carolina, we're really looking at mostly Carolina 1. Carolina 2 is somewhat in play as well, but Carolina 1 has gotten the majority of the action recently. The interesting thing about Carolina beyond Carolina 1 and Carolina 2 is that they have a min-priced D-man on the first power play who they just called up, Ty Smith. Doesn't have a great history of being super productive, so I can't say that he is necessarily a priority, and I do think he'll be pretty chalky. But at min price to be on the first power play, in smaller field, I think it's pretty hard to pass it up if you need the savings. So anyhow, you have Aho and Jarvis, and then you've got Svechnikov and Natchez. I sort of prefer Aho, Jarvis. They've been fairly productive recently, and you compare them with Ty Smith if you want. But I think you could also play Svechnikov and Natchez. The sheets don't think they're in a terribly good spot from a projection standpoint. You could say here they don't crack, the top 15 or so in terms of their median or ceiling. But I guess it's worth pointing out they have the highest total on the slate and a pretty good matchup. So I don't hate it, but I also think it's fine to play Ty Smith as a one-off if you need a punt D-man. Our next play after that is Edmonton. I have a hard time playing Edmonton, mostly because they just haven't been that good. The spot is okay. It's not a great pay spot, and it's not a great HDSF plus. It's okay. It's not bad, not terrible. The problem is that for their price, you're really paying a premium for a team that just hasn't been producing that much. They have a good median and a good ceiling because you've got McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, and Hyman for 21.5. But when you look at their 2X and their 3X, it leaves a little bit to be desired. There's a bunch of other teams that are 40% plus and even some 53 or upper 40s from a projection standpoint. So, I don't think it's crazy, but I can't say I love it. If you look at them, you've got, let me turn Carolina off here. You've got them nicely correlated with McDavid, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins, and Hyman. The problem is, you're going to go play McDavid instead of New Jersey, who we'll talk about in a minute, or McKinnon, who's been reliable on Colorado 1, or going more of a balanced build. And I just don't know that I can convince myself that Edmonton 1 is a priority spend up on this slate in a matchup that is just okay. So that's kind of how I feel about Edmonton. If you're playing them, you're probably playing Edmonton 1. You could convince yourself to play Draisaitl with them if you want to, but I think they're probably more of a larger field play. I do think Hyman is still pretty cheap at 6,600. And again, the sheets think they're okay from a raw point standpoint, but not from a point per dollar standpoint. They're not super strong. After that, we've got New Jersey. New Jersey is interesting because the research sheets really like them a lot, but then the range of outcomes don't. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. Maybe it's a sample thing where the range of outcomes are using a longer sample and the research sheets show you more recent sample. I do think they'll be pretty chalky. They've got one of the highest totals against arguably one of the worst defensive teams in the league. You can see here it's a decent game pace matchup. It's I think the second fastest, if not the fastest, game on the slate. So there should be plenty of events, and you can see their HDSF is very strong. So I don't have any real problem with New Jersey outside the fact the sheets don't love them from a projection standpoint. But if we go down and look at them, it's really New Jersey 1 and New Jersey 2. You've got in a recent sample, New Jersey 2 has been taking the majority of the shots and having more high danger chances. Over a little longer sample, it's 1 or 2. The nice thing you get in 1 as opposed to 2 is that you get Nason, who's really cheap to play with Hischier, who's been hot last couple games. So you get some savings over New Jersey 2. Admittedly, Jack Hughes is very good, as is Jesper Bratt. But I think if I had a gun to my head, I'd probably pick New Jersey 1 and just hope I get it from Nason and Hischier. But again, if we actually look at the projections, the median and ceiling, you've got New Jersey 2 here with a pretty bad 2x of 15%, and New Jersey 1 isn't even up there. It's down here at 18. Similarly, projects poorly. Admittedly, this is a spot that the sheets I think are pretty different from the industry, because if we go to DFO and look at them, we can see that they have them as the second highest projected line on the slate and the best, if not the second best value behind Dallas too, from a point per dollar standpoint. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to play probably 2, maybe 3 lineups tonight. And I'll definitely have some New Jersey in one of them. But again, I mean, sometimes the sheets are early, and given they're going to be chalky, I don't think it's crazy to fade them. But again, I think they're in a good spot. And from a correlation standpoint, they're pretty easy to play as well, because you've got Nason on the first power play alongside Hischier. I don't think you need to play Dougie Hamilton, but you can if you want to. As a 6K defenseman, he's a little pricey for his production. And then you've got Hughes and Jesper Bratt, who are second line also on the first power play. So anyhow, I think all those spots are in play. I think Meyer and Pilato are kind of optional if you want to play them with those guys. I'd probably focus on those 4 players if I'm playing them. The next spot we have after that is Dallas. I think Dallas is probably my favorite spot in the slate. They are in a very high pace spot. They've got the best HDSF plus. Buffalo has been really bad defensively, and Dallas has been taking a lot of shots and had a lot of high danger chances. The hard thing with Dallas is that you're trying to figure out which line to play. I do think there are some indications based on the recent play who you should play. If we look at this from a projected goal standpoint, it's 1 or 2, and last 14, these high danger chances for line 2 really stick out to me. I really like this Ben Wyatt Johnson line. It's probably a little bit of recency bias on my part because I played them recently when they kind of reshuffled their lines, and Ben and Johnson had several goal scoring events. Over the longer sample, I think 1 or 2 are compelling. I will say Jason Robertson is still wildly underpriced for his historical production and his recent output. And if we look at them from a correlative standpoint, Dallas, you've got Wyatt Johnson for 5,800. Jamie Benn is only 4K, also on the first power play. You can play them with Miro Heiskanen. And then you've got Jason Robertson with Rupe Hintz. If we look at Robertson just recently, He's had a 25-point DK game, 2 games ago 11, 3 games ago, 4 games ago 16.8. So he's been producing fine. He's just underpriced. He's a guy who in the past has been like mid sevens at times. I think he's even gotten up to 8K when he was producing last year. So I think Dallas 1 and Dallas 2 are both in really good spots. I don't think that's sneaky. I think Buffalo is known to be a bad defensive team, and Dallas has been playing really well. So I think they'll definitely catch some ownership, but I don't have a problem with Dallas 1 or Dallas 2. You also have Dodonov on Dallas 1, who's only 3K, and he's had a couple really nice games in a row with several multi-point games. So you can definitely throw him in there as a salary saver alongside your Robertson hints if you're playing line 1. After that, we've got Colorado. Colorado doesn't stand out as like a great spot. It's a average pace. HDSF plus is fine. It doesn't really stick out. What sticks out about Colorado is 2 things. Number one, they're getting all their production from the first line. If you look at this, it's very obvious that their high danger chances in last 14 shots are all coming from the first line. Over the greater sample, line 2 has produced 2, but I think you're really focused on McKinnon, Nichushkin, maybe with Lakeinen if you want to throw him in there. I know he produced recently, but he's usually the odd man out for me if I'm playing that line. And then obviously you got Cale Makar on the D. The other thing that sticks out about McKinnon specifically is that as opposed to McDavid, McKinnon has been just very reliable. Basically every slate he's produced, slate winning performances, 24, 16, 27, 21, 1 bad game, 7, 30, 16, 36. So he's a very reliable output machine. And for what it's worth, Winnipeg is also on a back-to-back. I don't think that's a huge thing, but I think it's worth at least something that's a positive. It looks like Jonathan Drouin is back playing for 3K on the second line with Mikko Rantanen. So I think you're deciding essentially line 1 or line 2. Given McKinnon being so strong and Nichushkin still only being 5,700, I would lean on line 1 if I'm playing them, but I don't think line 2 is crazy to use as well. And then the other thing I'll point out on Colorado is you've got a salary saver in Josh Manson, who just came back a couple games ago. He's a young guy. A lot of the Colorado fans are high on him. He produces, he shoots a lot. So he's a nice salary saver on D. I know we like to play power play D-men, but he's a guy I don't mind playing, even though he's not on a power play. He gets plenty of ice time, and he takes a lot of shots. Let me just check Discord to make sure. Okay, we're good. I'm going to keep moving here. So the next thing we'll go to here is Philadelphia. Philadelphia stands out because of their total and because of their HDSF plus. But if we look at that, that's mostly coming from the fact that San Jose is very bad defensively and not that Philadelphia is good. Philadelphia's shot 4 is poor, 25.5, almost the worst on the slate. HDCF, which is our high danger chances 4, very low as well, 9.9. The thing is that San Jose gives up a lot of shots and they give up a lot of high danger chances. So that's why their HDSF plus is strong. And to me, and I might eat my words, but Philadelphia is one of those, like, don't play a bad team on a big slate. I mean, they're enticing because of the matchup, but they haven't been playing that well. They haven't been taking a lot of shots. They haven't had a lot of high danger chances. So could they beat up on San Jose? Of course, it's San Jose, but I don't know that they're a priority. To make them even harder, the sheets don't have them super strong outside of their first line, where you have Couturier for free, who hasn't produced anything, with Connecting, who's a pay up, and Tippett, who's good but not correlated with power play 1. So they're very difficult to correlate from a power play forward line standpoint. If we look at Philadelphia, they're kind of a jumbled mess. You've got Connecting, Couturier. Couturier is enticing because he's 3,800, but the reason he's 3,800 is because he just hasn't done anything. And I don't know, like, he's got like 2 games with over 10 DK points. So if you want to pick on the matchup, I get it. I don't think it's crazy, but they have a 3.5 point total and they're not very correlated. So I don't know outside of there, how you necessarily approach them. To me, they're not a huge priority. Drysdale's also a power play 1 guy for 3K on D, but he hasn't done anything. So I don't know. It's not a it's not a super fast game either. The game pace on this game is really slow. So I think there's a lot of red flags here between Philadelphia not being that correlated, it looking like a slow game where it feels a little trappy. I don't think it's crazy to pick on San Jose, but I don't know that I'm going to do it. Next, we have Detroit. Detroit has a middling total, a slow game as well. We have picked on Pittsburgh this year defensively. They haven't been very strong. They're kind of aging. You've got Detroit 1 and 2. If you look at the research sheets, that'll be very obvious to you. I'll just show you guys quickly in case you haven't looked yourself. 1 and 2 with the points, and then 1 and 2 over the greater season are kind of the two lines that stick out. The sheets really like Detroit 1, or rather Detroit 2. Detroit 2 here is the 10th best median at a very low price. And you can see their 2x is very, very strong, as is their 3x, which tells you it's a really strong point per dollar play. So if we sort by 2x, they are the 8th or 9th best point per dollar play, and they're the only pay up line. All these other lines are punts aside from Minnesota 2. So I think Detroit 2 looks very strong from point per dollar standpoint. Kane and DeBrincat are the priorities there. If we look at their correlation, you can also throw in Sater, the defenseman, who's usually pretty productive. You can play Kane, DeBrincat with there's the two of them as a mini. You can play Kopp if you want, but I don't think he's a priority. You throw Sater in there as a 3-man, or you can play Larkin and Raymond, or you can even just power play stack 5-man them. You can play Kane, Larkin, DeBrincat, Sater, Raymond. So I think Detroit is a very solid play on the slate. The game pace isn't much to write home about, but they're fairly concentrated in those top two lines, and Pittsburgh defensively isn't great. And then the sheets really, really like Kane and DeBrincat. So I think they're an intriguing play for sure. If we go to the next team total here, we've got Minnesota and then Pittsburgh. Minnesota is interesting in that the game pace is okay. The high danger chances for is not great. They're missing Zuccarello, and they haven't really been very good. Not Zuccarello. They're missing Kaprizov, and without him, Boldy's been pushed up to line 1 alongside Zuccarello and Rossi. So it's kind of like not a very expensive line 1 pay up, but it's not a great game environment. So I don't think I'm going to get to them, but I think they are correlated and they won't be very owned, and the game environment looks okay. So, they'll come at lesser ownership because of those things. I just don't know that outside a large field, they're really a priority. Moving after Minnesota, we'll look at I'll just kind of run through my notes on these, and then I'll see if people have questions. So we've got Pittsburgh, Calgary, Vancouver, and then San Jose. I'll just say Pittsburgh, the only good thing I can say about them is that line 1 is correlated. They're expensive. The other thing I'll point out is Grizzle, 3,200 power play, 1 D-man. As opposed to like Drysdale, at least Grizzle's been producing. He's had several recent games where he's got some points. And then you've got Bunting. If you really want a cheap 2-man, you can play Bunting with Grizzle as a 2-man, or you can play Grizzle with one of these guys, or you can just one-off Grizzle. I don't know that I really feel the need to get up to Rust, Raquel, Crosby. They are pretty concentrated in terms of their output. If you look at the research sheets, you'll see that, but to me, they're not a huge priority. Calgary, I wanted to dislike. I'll just point out that I think they have a good amount of value. I don't know that I'm going to use them for value because I think there's teams that are in fine spots. Vancouver has really been struggling recently, and Calgary has had a few games down in a row where they've started producing a little bit better than they were for a while. Huberdeau had a couple pretty big games just over the last week. You can see here they were against bad teams in San Jose and Chicago, and then Ottawa, 3 really bad defensive teams. But sometimes you see a team where they get hot after playing bad matchups, and it kind of translates. They cooled off again and got shut out against Vegas 2 nights ago. But they are cheap, and so you can play Huberdeau with Kadri. Kadri's expensive, but he's good. You can also play Zari, who's 3,400. You can play Coleman and Backlund, who've both been producing for a pretty cheap play. So they have a lot of value. They're a little bit difficult to parse through. in terms of who you prioritize there. If we look at Calgary, their market share is mostly coming from line one, but line two and line three do also participate. I think Vancouver has also just been really bad recently, and so it is a spot where if you think that maybe some of their output can translate from a few games ago against similarly bad teams, and I don't think Vancouver's bad, but they've been cold. I think you could do worse than focusing on line one or line two for value. And then I think Zari himself is good value as well. So I think Calgary is intriguing value if you need some. If we look at the matchups for what we have left here, let me just go through game totals. I'll just tell you guys, San Jose to me is not in play. There's not much to like about them. We talked about Minnesota and Nashville. Nashville, people kind of make fun of it because it's funny at this point, but the sheets just continue to love Nashville 1. They have the highest median, the highest ceiling, a really strong 2x, really strong 3x. So, Mike brought it up in the Discord. I mean, I get it. I mean, they are concentrated. If we look at Nashville, Nashville 1 here is getting the majority of their output, but I can't tell you that the matchup really stands out. It's a fine HDSF plus. It's a fine pace. Minnesota's not great defensively, not terrible either. I think I don't know that Nashville 1's going to be that owned. Marchessault and Stamkos are still pretty cheap. So I think you could do worse than those guys. I just don't know that they're a priority for me. But admittedly, the sheets think I'm wrong there, and the sheets definitely think we should be prioritizing Stamkos and Marchessault. Besides them here, before we get some questions, we've got Winnipeg. Winnipeg's on a back-to-back. If you want to play them, you play line one. They're correlated. I don't find them particularly compelling, but you can if you want to play them. They have a low total on a back-to-back against Colorado. Colorado hasn't been amazing defensively, but not as bad as they've been since they've gotten some decent tending once they got rid of Georgiev via Blackwood and their other guy. Columbus, I'll just point out, tends to get in shootouts. They've had a lot of high-scoring games, and almost all their production is coming from line one. So if we go to the market share here, you can see Columbus 1 with Monahan, Marchenko, Voronikov all across here, the high danger chances and shots, both the recent sample and over the course of the longer season. That's where it's all coming from. Voronikov still remains way too cheap, and I'm sure he'll be owned because everybody's come to realize this. But you've got Voronikov is only 4,700, Monahan and Marchenko. Werenski is 8,300, so I don't know that he's a priority. But if we look here, look at Voronikov for 4,300. The guy he had a 35-point game, 24-point game, a 13-point game just over the last week. In games 6-2, 5-4, 5-4, 4-2, 3-5. So they just have a lot of high-scoring games, and they're playing a Carolina team that may put some pucks in. So I wouldn't be that surprised if that turns into a bit of a shootout. And I think you could do worse than considering a game stack. And so that's an intriguing approach. But for what it's worth, the sheets don't really agree with that. Columbus is all the way down here with a pretty bad 2x of 26%. If we continue down here, Utah doesn't have almost anything that sticks out. Buffalo, I'll just point out one thing on these last two teams. Buffalo has a pay down value guy in Quinn, who's only 3,200 on the second line for his power play. 3,200 for a really cheap player who over the last week has had several multi-point games. So I think he's an intriguing one-off at 3,200. And then the last thing I'll point out on Anaheim is the lowest team total. But I'll just point out that this Fabry, McTavish, Gauthier line for nothing. I mean, combined, just looking at it, about 8,500 or so. Has been on fire over the last week, taking a ton of shots. Each of them has produced. I do think McTavish, Gauthier, and Fabry as a contrarian value pay down sort of line is intriguing in that game. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think that the other thing, when we look at the sims, I'll just rerun these to make sure we have accurate, up-to-date data, is, let's run this real quick. Probably most of you watching are subs, but if you're not, this is another reason why you should sub, is that you have access to sims that are really fast, as well as projections. Is if we look at the stacks, the most common stacks that they like are 2 and 4 man, with the 4 man kind of having a nice projection and being in winning lineups roughly half the time or so. And then you can see here that onslaughts have a very strong projection, but aren't as common for winning. So I don't think onslaughts are going to be my approach for this slate. I think I'll probably be focused more on 3-man and 4-man stacks with some minis. But if you find a 5-man, it's not out of the picture given the projection that you can get out of it. In terms of players with edge, you can see here the ones that the sheets really like at center are Stamkos, Draisaitl, and Crosby, with Nashville 1 really standing out as kind of a place where the sheets think there's significant edge. At wing, similarly, Forsberg and Marchessault. So again, Nashville 1. It is worth noting Crosby and Rust, who are both on Pittsburgh 1, are up there as well. And then at D, it's got Bouchard as some edge, and Carlson or Harley, but admittedly not as much edge as you're getting at your forward or your center exposure. And then if we look at the teams here, the exposures that the sheets like are Nashville and Pittsburgh, Edmonton. These are the teams. A lot of this is driven by ownership, right? Because the sheets love Nashville's projection, and ownership-wise, they're not going to be that chalky. Pittsburgh similarly won't be very owned, and they're getting a lot of concentrated out for Pittsburgh 1. And then for all the reasons I pointed out before, people would rather pay up for New Jersey in a spot against Anaheim or Colorado, who's been really reliable on a back-to-back against Winnipeg, instead of paying up for Edmonton. So, and then there's Detroit and Dallas, who I mentioned I really like. So, if I had to kind of go through the slate and give you my summary, I would tell you, I think for pay-ups, while the sheets don't love them, I kind of do like New Jersey in that spot against Anaheim. I do like Colorado 1 because McKinnon is so strong. I understand that the sheets like Nashville, but I don't know that I can go there. And I think Carolina 1 and Carolina 2 are intriguing against Columbus in a game that may have high output. I think Dallas is in a great spot. Probably the environment I like the most on this slate is Dallas. I think Dallas 1 and 2 with either the Hintz Robertson line or the Jamie Benn Wyatt Johnson line are very, very strong. We do have several D-men who are punts. We have Manson, who's a min priced on Colorado. We have Ty Smith, who's on the first power play on Carolina. And we have Grizzle on Pittsburgh, who's on the first power play as well. And then we've got a bunch of value on Calgary. And then you can pay all the way down to Anaheim as well if you want a cheap line to play for value. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think from the standpoint of the range of outcomes, you can see the sheets really like Nashville 1 and Pittsburgh 1. From a value standpoint, you've got some of the usual suspects here, but also Detroit 2 really, really sticks out, as does some of the Dallas lines and Calgary, who I mentioned before. So with that said, I will see here if anybody has any questions. If you do, feel free to post them in the Discord. And I'm trying to see here if I can. James jumped off. He's feeling a little bit under the weather. But let me see here if I can figure out how I get to anybody's questions. Apologize for the dead air here. Let me see. I can't see the questions. Let's see, comments. Okay, yeah, here's a couple questions. Ryan asks, what do you think about stacking 4 to 5 Dallas players? I think it's viable. I think, Dallas is probably my favorite game environment. I think it's a pace-up spot, and it's a really bad defense. I don't think it's crazy at all to say, you know what, I'm going to play Wyatt Johnson, Jamie Benn, Hintz, Robertson, you can even 5-man them with Miro Heiskanen if you want to play a full power play stack. Or just pick your favorite 4 of those guys, and even if you want to, you can throw a Danov in there for 3K, who's just cheap enough where it's viable. So I think that's a perfectly viable approach on this slate. That's probably my favorite spot. Let's see here if anybody else has any questions. No other questions here in the StreamYard. Let me ask on the Discord. If not, I will give you guys my summary thoughts on the Discord as well. And if not, we will be on there answering questions. But I think, there's a bunch of really good spots in New Jersey, Dallas. There's some Nashville, Pittsburgh who won't be zoned. I don't think I'm gonna play Edmonton, but they'll be unowned. And then I think Colorado 1 has just been super reliable. So I don't know that I have any super novel thoughts here. Mike will be on as well too. With that said, I will wish everybody a happy new year. Check one last time for any questions. Doesn't look like there are. And I'll be around on the Discord to answer questions. So hope everybody's having fun with their families, and hope one of us takes down whatever GPPs we're all playing tonight. Thank you guys for hanging out, and talk to you all soon.